wearing some demonic duds. Here's your look at the new McFarlane toys, Spawn, Raven Spawn. The demonic lord Cray Von Gore and one of Malbolgia's Death Knights was credited with the creation of the K7 Letha, also known as the Hellspawn suit, the symbiotic suit that adapted itself to its host to create a Hellspawn. He was defeated, and the suit was sealed away in the Necros Stone. Anyone who found the stone was endowed with the Hellspawn suit and became a spawn. As we're just about to have a look at the Raven Spawn, do you mind if I just cut in line here for a second? I know we haven't looked at a lot of Spawn figures here on this channel, but it's certainly something I'm going to rectify, especially considering the really incredible looking figures that McFarlane Toys are pumping out right now. I can do one comparison, certainly at least. I'm going to move over Raven Spawn, and we're going to free up what I hope to be enough space to bring in quite the large big boy here. This is the recently looked at Violator. I love this figure. The amount of plastic and sculpt that they put into both the figures, but just to kind of put things hopefully in proper perspective. I mean, when you look at a Raven Spawn, that Raven Spawn is a regular sized McFarlane release. It still only goes to about the elbow portion of the Violator. Yeah, the Violator's pretty big boy. Now, I did actually pick up both of these figures over on Entertainment Earth. Somebody had asked me before where I was finding these Spawn figures. Entertainment Earth, actually, I found was one of the best places to find it. One of the more affordable sites for Spawn figures, and it certainly delivered these figures fast. I think I ordered these, and they arrived to my doorstep within about a week or so. It's absolutely crazy. But at least, yeah, if you guys are interested in picking these up for yourself, I'll provide the link down below to Entertainment Earth, where they should hopefully still be in stock if you guys are interested. For the figure's accessories, though, why don't we first have a look at its display stand. The display stand at least is properly sized to this figure, unlike the Violator, but just to reach off to the side and bring in the Violator's display stand, as you can see, they are identical to one another. I do like the white. I wonder what this would look like if they did the Spawn in green instead. I just think that would really pop, but I think consistently when it comes to brandishing these display stands, I think McFarlane Toys tend to put their font in white. Just kind of throwing it out there. I wonder what it would look like in green. Certainly, though, these display stands do come in handy, especially if you want to put your characters in some more interesting dynamic poses than just simply having them standing there like I've got going on right now. Moving on to the other accessories that come included with the figure. The figure comes with this really large staff, which I guess could be staff/axe. You can see that the axe blades, one larger on the outside, one smaller, I guess, on the back side. And does have some really interesting looking sculpting. I love the skulls that they've sculpted at the top of this. It's a very elaborate, very ornate looking staff weapon that he has here. There is, yes, always the opportunity. I think they could have gone in there and brushed some additional paint. So it simply isn't just using the same brown plastic from the top of the staff to the very bottom here. But I do think like the skull work is really good on this. I'm almost tempted to, even myself, to kind of go in there with a brush and just put a darker wash in there, because I think it would really help to bring a lot of the details out. I just wish that this was something that they would do a lot more with their accessories. I mean, even like looking at the bottom here, just the great looking sculpting of those skulls. They seem to be similar skulls, somewhat similar, as you can see from the top to the bottom here. Now, this can actually fit into his hand, either hand really. I really like to display him with the staff on this side myself. I guess I really should get away from calling this a staff. It's clearly more like an axe than anything else. Just a really, really long axe. But I guess I always say it's a staff because, you know, again, when you're looking at the length of it. But yeah, I usually put it in this hand. But I mean, really, you could have it in either hand. It doesn't have to be a dedicated hand to hold the weapon. Speaking of other weapons, though, he does have this chain with hook. Again, larger hook on the one end and slightly smaller hook on the other. You can do one of two things, actually, when it comes to displaying this. Let's go ahead and just take the axe out of his hand for the time being. We'll put that to the side. At the beginning of this review, what I ended up doing, sort of taking cues from Scorpion, I actually put the smaller handle in this hand, like that. Just get the hands. If you have any difficulties getting the hands to open up, I mean, the plastic is fairly soft anyways. You always take a hairdryer and you can use hot water as well. But at the beginning of this review, I sort of did something like Scorpion. Smaller handle in his hand, and then the larger hook sticking out. get over here. Or I guess what you can also do as well, if you want to have it more displayed as a weapon, take the larger handled blade, the hook here, and sort of now you just got this excess chain that hangs off from the bottom of the handle. And I guess as well, you really could wrap this around his leg. It doesn't have to be necessarily where it has to be just trailing off to the side like a snake. But yeah, you can probably just wrap it around his leg if you wanted to. And that also looks really good too. Taking both the weapons out of his hands now and put those to the side. Let's get a closer look now at Ravenspawn. This one really did catch my attention. I love the design of this one. I always was a big fan of Ravenspawn's look anyways. And I think that like the new figure really does capture that creepy looking design of both his helmet, his face, and the rest of his body. One good thing that they've done is by painting the eyes so brightly green like this, it really does help to make those pop, especially seeing as really when you look at the rest of the figure, there's so much dark coloring happening here. The top cloak, which sort of goes into his cape, is more of that very dark blue. And there's a lot of it really, like it's the cape as well as, of course, the part of the helmet that goes around the face sculpt here. And then for the rest of his body, both his face and the rest of his body is kind of like this kind of darker brownish gray. It's really everywhere too. And we're, of course, going to spend a lot more time talking about the sculpting, because that's certainly one thing that I find has been doing so well for these Spawn figures as of late. Maybe, yeah, there could have been the opportunity to go in there some extra wash of paint, but there's nothing denying, I think, hopefully, that the sculpt that they put into these figures has just been absolutely incredible. I'm going to spin this around as best as I can, give you guys as close of an experience as I possibly can, so show you guys the work that they sculpted into this. I may have even actually said this when we looked at the Violator, but I know, like, McFarlane Toys putting out a lot of figures as of late. Gotta feel like they're putting a lot more love when it comes to the Spawn stuff, because this is simply what I consider to be some of the best sculpting that we've been getting from McFarlane Toys as of late. Love this head sculpt. It's fairly soft plastic too, really. The cloak part that's going to go over top of the shoulders is a fairly soft plastic. It's pretty soft even on the shoulders as well. And the cape, as you can also see as well. I like it how it kind of has a tattered, layered look to it. So it doesn't look like it's all same material. It actually looks like it's different, just shards and ripped off pieces of fabric that are just draped on top of one another. I think that looks really neat, the way they've done that. It's fairly shiny plastic, too. I think that also works well for a character like Ravenspawn. I don't think you really want to have very matte-looking plastic. The shiny plastic definitely does go a long way, especially when it comes to his head sculpt. Super, super cool. Then we get to the rest of his body. And again, going back to the point I mentioned when we looked at the staff/axe, yeah, there is the opportunity that they could have easily gone in there and added some additional paint. But I tell you though, even if the paint isn't really there, there's a lot of sculpting that's happening here. Very, very elaborate looking sculptings that they put not only to the arms, the spikes that stick out from his gauntlets here, as well as, again, you can start pointing out all the different skulls that are on his body. Like there's this one right here that's just above his chain belt. He does have, yes, a chain belt. It's a softer plastic, and that wraps around his body. I just love this skull. This looks like something I would have seen in a Hellraiser movie. Very, very cool. I mean, again, when we look at like the detail work that they've managed to incorporate into like the knee pads, for example. 2 skulls greeting you on either side. And then there's also these additional skulls that are just above the cuffs of his boots. I guess the guard that go over top of his legs. I mean, certainly you could never say that looking at a figure, even when you flip the cape up, a part that you really wouldn't have seen anyways, they dedicate just as much time to sculpt the back as they do to the front. In some cases, actually, while you're looking at the legs, it looks like the side of a tree trunk, like the actual bark. Very, very cool the way they've done this. Yes, admittingly, there always is an opportunity where they think they could have gone in there and added some additional much-needed paint. But I don't feel like I'm looking at Ravenspawn and thinking he's lacking paint. Because, again, whatever he's lacking in the paint department, he's more than certainly making up for it in the sculpt department. Moving now on to the posability on Ravenspawn, I'm going to one last time spin the head sculpt around so you can see it from all the sides. I'm doing this also one last time so you guys can really appreciate the work that they put into this, but to also draw your attention to 2 places that normally would be problems when it comes to rotating the figure's head. The first one being this point that sticks down at the bottom of his helmet. The other place being these guards that come down to protect the side of his face. Now, in both the cases, they go pretty far down, so you would think, well, I wouldn't be able then to rotate the head sculpt around. Well, first of all, it helps that these are both softer plastic. So when it comes to at least the head rotation, that's not going to get in the way of things. The softer plastic, as you can see, easily skims over the sculpting of the top of the shoulders. But also, when you look to tilt the head back, normally, again, you've had that little point that would be getting in the way of things, but I don't know if this was intentional, but if you look at the back where the shoulders are, see how it kind of curves in, gives you like a little bit of a canal. I don't know if they've intentionally done this, but it's something I noticed here, that when it comes to rotating the head or hinging the head backwards, can you see how that point actually sits inside that little canal? Now again, if this was completely flat across, the top of that helmet would hit it, and you wouldn't be able to move it. Clever the way they've done that. I don't know if it's just intentional or if it's just something I noticed, but it does allow the head to tilt further back. When it comes to also bringing the head forward, you can bring the head down, and it sort of contours to the shape of the neck. Deliberate? I'm not really sure, but it's certainly something that if it was deliberate, it was really smart on their part to sculpt the back of the torso and the front of the torso to allow the head to tilt back and forth. Also, as well, you can also tilt the head this way as well. I mean, there's nothing getting in the way of things that way. Now, when it comes to his arms, moving on to his arms, we already looked at the fact that the shoulders here are softer plastic, but they are actually separate pieces from the top of the main torso cape. Because of that, when it comes to rotating the arms back and forth this way, you're not going to have any issues. It still looks like it's part of the same sculpt, but it doesn't hang up those arms, preventing you from being able to do this. Where there is a bit of an issue, though, is when it comes to bringing the arms outward. The front isn't so much, but if you look at the back, they've actually pegged the back of the shoulder cape to the top, almost around the area of the tricep. I guess they did that too, so when you are moving the arms, the top of the shoulders are going to go along with it. But yeah, when you are bringing it out, it sort of wants to move here, but it can't move here. So it gets a little more hung up when you want to bring the arms out. I guess you can bring still the arms out almost, I guess more than a 45. I was going to say almost about a 90, but comfortably I would say it would sit at about a 45-degree angle. There's also a bicep swivel. The figure does have a double hinge on the elbow. And then when it comes to his hands, the hands rotate back and forth. Now, being the way that they've done the guards here, these spiky looking guards, they've actually covered the top of the hands, but they haven't attached them, so the hands are still free to move around on their own. For the figure's upper torso, the figure has an upper torso ball joint. It seems as well he also has a lower torso articulated point that actually goes just below the top of, I guess, would be his waist belt area, which is basically just a continuation of his legs. But they did a pretty good job of hiding it here. I actually like the way they've got this gap right here because it gives him a little bit of contrasting depth as opposed to sculpting it all together. And of course, it does help when it comes to rotating the torso. You wouldn't be able to do that if this was all one piece after all. When it comes to the legs again seem to be on a ratcheted joint. You can bring the legs forward. You can bring the legs back. You can swivel at the top where that attaches to that ball joint. It also has a double hinge on the knee. And then the figure, when it comes to his boots, they can move back and forth this way. You can also ankle tilt them, and the figure does have also toe articulation. Sometimes I know people aren't so crazy about toe articulation. I guess it depends on really the figure. I mean, I'm fine for the idea that they incorporate it because, again, you never know. You never know when you want to use that toe articulation. Still a great looking figure, though. I love the look of Ravenspawn. He's got some really dark colors going for him. Again, he doesn't have a lot of paint, but the category he more than easily fulfills is sculpting. The figure's got a lot of really elaborate looking sculpts, not only to his head sculpt, his shoulder cape cloak thing that he wears, as well as the rest of his body. All really make for a really interesting looking Ravenspawn to be put on display. I think the real appeal, or the hook, pardon me for saying that, of McFarlane's figure line has always been, you didn't have to necessarily know who these characters were. The thing that lured you in as a casual collector was the sculpting of these figures. Early days into my collecting McFarlane figures, I didn't know who Cygor was. I didn't know who Overkill was, but I just found appreciation into the figure line that those started getting collected first, long before I was really heavily into collecting Spawn comics. I guess sort of the opposite ended up happening. Casual collectors nowadays may walk by a Ravenspawn not knowing who Ravenspawn is, but appreciating the sculpt and a sort of eerie look of what almost seems like a walking Grim Reaper with battle axe in one hand, hook and chain in the other, and may then pick up the figure solely on just the look alone, and then afterwards wants to know more about Ravenspawn. McFarlane Toys is sort of that unique toy line where you're not always necessarily buying it because you instantly identify the character that the figure's based from. A lot of times, and the casual collectors will tell you, people are picking up McFarlane figures first for the sculpt, the way the characters look, and then maybe afterwards, learning a little bit about more the characters that the figures are based from. Certainly when it comes to Ravenspawn, you don't have to necessarily know who the character is. You can just appreciate the fact that you've got a creepy looking character that sits on your shelf who has a big giant battle axe. You can't beat that. Ravenspawn certainly as a more dedicated fan now of Spawn characters. I know even though I don't review as many here on this channel, I really like the work that they put into this figure. It doesn't have a lot of paint, to be fair, but it does have some pretty interesting looking accessories. I kind of like the way of wrapping the chain around the one leg of it, so it sort of looks like it's snaking around the Ravenspawn's leg. It's just, again, a really neat looking, really interesting looking figure. I'm glad I picked this one up. Now, again, speaking of picking this one up, recently I've been finding, actually over on Entertainment Earth, a whole bunch of Spawn figures at a really affordable price. And judging by what you guys have told me as well, Entertainment Earth seems to have one of the best prices around when it comes to Spawn figures, with the Violator figure being some of the lowest I've seen. If you guys are interested in picking this one up, along with the Violator, I'll provide the link down below in the video description, where you can head on over to Entertainment Earth, pick up the Ravenspawn for yourself, as well as the other Spawn figures that they have in their collection or in their catalog right now. If you guys are also new to this channel, enjoying the content you're seeing, hit that subscribe button down below. You can as well turn on that bell notification. First of all, it helps you get those friendly reminders of when new videos are popping up. But also it helps the channels too. Getting those bell notifications run also is that way of telling YouTube that this channel is getting activity. So if you are wanting to help this channel out, make sure you hit that bell notification and keep your peepers peeled, because there will be more Spawn reviews coming your way in the not so distant future. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.